Faith is coming in.
We do have a quorum.
Okay, excellent. We do have a quorum. And welcome everyone to the open session to hear public comment before closed session. Call the roll, please, Madam Clerk.
Vice Mayor Bates,
Present.
Councilmember Choi,
Here.
Councilmember Johnson,
Here.
Councilmember Martinez. Absent. Councilmember Myrick will be absent the entire meeting. Councilmember Willis is absent, and Mayor Butt.
Here.
Okay. I'd like to ask our attendees to go ahead and raise their hand if they would like to make comments on either of the following items that will be discussed during closed session. Liability claims, Robin Poindexter versus City of Richmond, Mark Cincinnero versus City of Richmond, conference with legal counsel existing litigation, Cooley versus City of Richmond et al., and conference with labor negotiators, agency representative Jack Hughes, employee organizations, SEIU Local 1021, full-time unit, SEIU Local 1021, part-time unit, IFPTE Local 21, mid-level management unit, IFPTE Local 21, executive management unit, Richmond Police Officers Association, RPOA, Richmond Police Management Association, RPMA, IAFF Local 188, and Richmond Fire Management Association, RFMA. Let's see.
Do you have any speakers signed up?
No, we do not have anyone.
No speakers. All right. Okay, in that case, we are adjourned to closed session.
Eduardo, everybody's in the closed session already. I can't hear you.
I see it now. All right.
Hi, just wanted to do an audio and video check before 6:30.
We hear you.
Okay, great. I will go silent now. Thanks.
Thanks. Jacine, we see you.
I'm there, Richard.
Hello, Bruce. Jacine, Jacine, we see you.
1, 2, 3.
Hey, Nanette, can you take your share screen down until it's time to bring it up?
Sure.
Okay, I believe we have a quorum, Madam Clerk.
Time is 6:28.
So, welcome to the special meeting of the Richmond Housing Authority. We'll be starting with tonight. Will you call the roll, please?
Vice Chair Bates,
Present.
Commissioner Choi,
Here.
Commissioner Johnson,
Here.
Commissioner Martinez is absent. Commissioner Myrick is absent. Commissioner Willis is absent, and Chair Butt,
Here.
and Tenant Commissioner Scott.
Is Commissioner Scott here?
He's here.
Oh,
Okay.
good. All right.
Next on the agenda, is statement of conflict of interest. Are there any? Hearing none. Next on the agenda is a report from the executive director.
Good evening, commissioners. I hope you had a nice recess off. Just have a few announcements today or updates. Wanted to report that we finally hired a resident housing manager. He's been with us for approximately 3 weeks. We've had a number of accolades and good comments about his work, and we are pleased with the condition of the Nevin Plaza building. We've been doing a lot of work. And we also received some good news from HUD, and we, at the request of Mayor Butt, received a technical assistance grant for some work from consultants to work on a study of the debt that's owed to the city of Richmond. And we had our kickoff meeting on last Thursday. So we are very excited to be working with the consultant CVR and HUD and getting started on the review of outstanding debt. We also, over the year, actually, not just the past few months, received a number of complaints from neighbors and our residents of Nystrom Village of the ongoing dumping and the blight at that property. And we just want to thank our team, Public Works team, for helping and assisting the Richmond Housing Authority with cleaning up Nevin Plaza. This is just one of the parking lots and how it looked last week before the team cleaned it up. The abatement team was able to take 6 truckloads of garbage and furniture that has been just dumped at Nystrom Village over the past few weeks.
Nanette, this is Shas. We need to go ahead and allow you to share the screen again, if that's okay, Mayor Butt and members of the board, so that we can show the presentation, if that's okay. so you can see the photos?
It's,
Sure, please
oh,
do.
I'm sorry. I thought
Right, Richard asked that we take it down, I think, at the beginning for roll call.
okay, let me go back and I'll go right through it. Can you see it now?
I think it's beginning to show up. KCRT, are you available? And if not, we'll just move through the presentation verbally.
You got to bring up your PowerPoint. We see your blue desktop only, your second screen.
Okay.
Miss Annette, can you unshare your screen? Oh, there it goes.
There it is.
You see it? Okay. Let me go back to the beginning so you can see all the pictures.
Whoa.
So this is the before, and this is an ongoing problem. So we really want to thank the abatement team because this is not the only time that we've contacted them and they've responded, but this was a very, very big ask. And they just stepped in and helped the resident housing manager. And thank you to Camino for staying on top of this in my absence and getting Nisham cleaned up. And this is the after. We're also working with the code enforcement to get this trailer removed. It's not on wheels, so we can't tow it away. So we're working with them and the police department to get rid of this trailer that's burned out and is unsafe situation for anyone that might try to enter into it.
In particular, we'd like to thank Hugo and Yader with the Public Works team for the work that was completed on Saturday after the Hilltop neighborhood cleanup. And so we just really are very appreciative. We know that staff is stretched very thin. And so we really appreciate them making the effort to coordinate with Gabino and the city manager's office to address this health and safety issue. And that's why we're actively marketing the site, and we look forward to bringing a developer to the city council for selection in October for this site. Thank you.
And finally, more good news. Today, Nevin Plaza residents received free meals as a result of the Hobart Trust. They came over earlier in the week and asked for the residents to see if they were interested in receiving a free lunch. It was delivered to the site today and 100 residents signed up, but they actually issued 125 free lunches in conjunction with La Strada and the Hobart Trust. So we really want to thank them. The residents were very pleased. For the residents that were shut in, they actually delivered to the door, and other residents came and picked up their lunches. So we really want to thank everybody that participated in this. And that concludes my report.
Anybody have any questions? Okay, thank you very much. Let's move on to the next item.
Next item is agenda review.
Anybody want to remove anything from the consent calendar?
Yes, I request that G1 be removed, Mr. Mayor.
This is Richmond Housing Authority.
This is the Housing Authority.
Okay.
Okay. I don't see anybody who wants anything removed, so
Okay, next, we need a motion to approve the
yeah,
consent.
do we have a, can you take down the PowerPoint, please, so I can see everybody?
Sure.
Thank you. Okay, is there a motion on the consent calendar?
So move.
Okay, motion from Commissioner Bates,
Second.
second from Commissioner Willis. You want to call the roll, please, Madam Clerk?
Vice Chair Bates,
Yes.
Commissioner Choi,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson, Commissioner Johnson, absent. Commissioner Martinez?
Yes.
Commissioner Myrick is absent. Commissioner Willis? Commissioner Willis? That's a yes. Tenant Commissioner Scott?
Yes.
Tenant Commissioner Scott?
Here, yes.
But,
And Chair Butt?
yes.
And looks like Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes with Commissioner Myrick absent.
Thank you. Good evening.
This meeting is adjourned at 6:37.
Okay, now we are convening the regular meeting of the successor agency to the Richmond Community Development Agency and the Richmond City Council. Call the roll, please.
Vice Mayor Bates?
Here.
Councilmember Choi?
Here.
Member Johnson?
Here.
Councilmember Martinez?
Here.
Councilmember Willis? Councilmember Willis? Absent. Councilmember Myrick is absent. And Mayor Butt?
Here.
On the agenda, statement of conflict of interest, are there any? Hearing none. Under item C, agenda review, we have a request from the public to remove item H7 from the consent calendar to be discussed at the end of the agenda. Item G1 is agendized incorrectly and should be discussed under resolutions. And that will come directly after public hearing. So Vice Mayor Bates, your item should be under resolutions and not consent calendar. So we'll.
Thank you.
Okay, so you said G1 will be moved after the consent calendar, right?
After public hearings, and that it should be under resolution.
Okay.
Item J1 is continued to October 6th. And that's all the items that I have to remove, and then I have an announcement if there are no other items.
Okay, any other changes to the agenda? I don't hear any.
Okay, then I'll make this announcement real quick. Anyone may make an oral comment, even if the written comment has been previously submitted. However, each speaker may only raise their hand once to make one oral public comment per agenda item. As we move through the agenda, I will announce the next item number and ask individuals who would like to address the council to raise their hand. After the item is read into the record, the request to speak period on the item will be closed. To comment by video conference, click on the participants button at the bottom of the screen and select the raise hand button. And to comment, if you're joining us by phone, press the *9. So then we will hold an open forum very shortly. So individuals who would like to address the council under open forum should start raising their hands right now. And as a reminder, as I read earlier, item H7 has been removed from the consent calendar, and individuals that would like to speak on that item would have to wait until that item is called for discussion at the end of the agenda.
Okay, next item.
Item is a report from the city attorney of final decisions made during closed session.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. I have one item to report this evening. In closed session, the City Council approved a settlement in Teresa Cooley versus City of Richmond, which is Contra Costa Superior Court case number MSC 16-01860. The vote was a unanimous vote of 6 of the council members attending, and the settlement was for a payment of $47,500 in exchange for a release of claims. And that concludes my report this evening. Thank you.
Next on the agenda is a report from the city manager.
No report this evening.
Our next item is open forum. Each speaker will be allowed up to 2 minutes. And we have a total of 4 speakers. Okay.
Okay, the first speaker is Angela Cox. Angela, you have 2 minutes to speak. You can go ahead and start.
Good evening, Mayor Butt, City Council, and citizens listening to this meeting. My name is Angela Cox, and I'm the Teen Services Librarian at the Richmond Public Library. On September 22nd, the Richmond Public Library teens, the Richmond Youth Council members, and young adults will be hosting a drive-through voter registration event in the parking lot at Barrett and 25th. This is being held to register voters no matter what your party affiliation is. It's a safe and secure environment, and your registration will be delivered to the Elections Department, and so you can rest assured that it doesn't have to go through the Postal Service. This event is open to Alameda County and Contra Costa County residents. It is also open to individuals that are homeless but do have an address where they receive mail. We are holding this event with many other organizations all across the country for National Voter Registration Day. It's a push to get all voters to register to vote so that their voice can be heard. And we invite you to come and encourage you to come and tell others.
Thank you. The next speaker is Benjamin Terrell. Benjamin, you have 2 minutes to speak. You can go ahead and start. Ben?
President of the Richmond Police Officers Association. I want to address several intertwined issues, including the absolute lack of decorum of the overall council, starting specifically with the lack of humanity displayed by CPRC Council Liaison, Councilmember J.L. Myrick. Many of us present during the meeting and those subsequently made aware of after the fact are still outraged by the disparaging comments you made at the meeting on September 2nd, 2020. Referring to then fallen Sergeant Thomas, Councilmember Myrick stated, quote, "You look at all of what someone did in their life and it's hard to sort of, forget about the great things they did because of their later mistakes," end quote. I asked JL that evening to publicly walk back that degrading and quite frankly stupid comment back. Sergeant Thomas defended himself and his wife against a man who threatened their lives and created an argument for nothing and subsequently brandished a firearm while threatening Sergeant Thomas and his wife. As per usual, you're short on facts with your inept comments. You owe the chief of police and every woman and man wearing the Richmond uniform an apology for your disparaging remarks. You sure as hell owe the widow an apology. The rest of this statement is not meant to take anything away from those mentioned during the last council session. They deserve their adjournment and they deserve the tip of the hat and salute for their civic participation. But no leader mentioned or gave condolences to a city worker of almost 25 years. No resolution was drafted by any council member or the mayor's office to recognize Sergeant Thomas. It would be unbelievable, but it's not. It's Richmond. Sergeant Thomas spent the vast majority of his working life in service to our community. He contracted the COVID-19 virus for working the streets as an essential worker. His death is no different than if he took a bullet while wearing the uniform. Out of all of you, only Vice Mayor Bates sent a specific, thoughtful, and heartfelt message to either Chief French or myself. Mayor Butt essentially retweeted the East Bay Times forum on his page, but nothing back with city fanfare. No one asked for information about his widow, who was furious, by the way, at the lack of dignity shown by the council, and rightfully so. In fact, only a sole police commissioner, Stephen Lacey, represented the city at his funeral. Again, besides Mayor Bates, volunteer police commissioner, no one else did what the governor of the state of California did, and the attorney general.
Thank you, Ben. My next speaker is Tom B.A. Tom, you have 2 minutes to speak. You can go ahead and start. Tom? Tom?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Hello, Council. My name is Tom Phelps, and I'm the business agent for Richmond Fire Local 188. I'm here tonight to speak against paying for 2 HR directors. Allison is staying on as a contractor, but contractors should never have decision-making authority. Their role should be limited to consulting, and the scope of their services should be explicitly stated in the contract. Your Mickey Mouse fiscal emergency vote is another good reason not to have this duplicate expense. The scope of services, time frame, and cost for her continuing services should be explicitly stated in a contract and shared with us so we can respond, and it must be approved by council. Thank you. I yield the rest of my time.
Thank you. The next speaker is Tarnell Abbott. Tarnell, you have 2 minutes to speak. You can go ahead and start.
Good evening. I just want to say that last week's vote on Point Melody was absolutely despicable, with the exception of council members Melvin Willis and Eduardo Martinez, who did not vote for it. I want to know how many of you council members read the 1,000 plus pages of the DSEIR before you voted on it. I'll bet you didn't read the whole thing. I also want to say that the American Institute of Architects has a code of ethics, and I think Mayor Butt needs to reread them. In particular, ES 1.3, Natural and Cultural Heritage, which reads, natural and cultural heritage. Members should respect and help conserve their natural and cultural heritage while striving to improve the environment and the quality of life within it. Well, you just trampled all over the environment with that vote and pushing it through in a hurried way that you didn't need to do. And you trampled all over the cultural heritage of the Ohlone people, who were the original inhabitants, by not allowing the designated entity to speak on that issue. I would also ask you to review ES 1.5, having to do with human dignity and health, ES 2.4 on environmental equity and justice, especially rule point 2.401, and Canon 6, ES 6.4 ecosystems. And I think, Tom, if you really want to practice architecture, you really need to review the ethics, because having your appointees on city council who you are on, planning commission and design review board, who are your relatives and employees in any other place would be considered nepotism. And that's what it is, whether you want to admit it or not.
Time has expired. Thank you. And that was my last speaker for public forum.
And we have one comment that we received by 1 p.m. today. The comment is a request to the council to invite Andy Kratz to make a presentation regarding the need for a hospital in West County. And this person also is in support of consent item H2. And that concludes.
Okay, that concludes the comments. Okay, let's move to the next item.
Next item is an approval of the consent calendar, and that excludes item H7.
Okay, is there a motion on the consent calendar?
So moved.
Okay, a second. We have a second.
Second.
By Councilmember Choi. Call the roll, please, Madam Clerk.
Vice Mayor Bates,
Yes.
Member Choi,
Yes.
Member Johnson,
Yes.
Councilmember Martinez,
Yes.
Councilmember Willis,
No on H7, but yes to everything else.
H7 will be discussed later on. So this is, H7 will be discussed at the end of the agenda. So it's not included.
My apologies. I missed that part. I apologize. But yes, thank you.
And Mayor Butt,
Yes.
the motion passes with Councilmember Myrick absent.
So are we moving now to G1?
We're moving now to G1, yes.
Okay.
Individuals that would like to speak on this item, please raise your hand now. And the time is 6:50. Item G1 is to adopt a resolution authorizing the issuance of tax exempt and or taxable refunding bonds in an amount not to exceed $25 million for the purpose of financing the prepayment of certain obligations under a loan agreement and the refunding of certain bonds of the Richmond Community Redevelopment Agency on funding a swap termination payment related to the Richmond Community Redevelopment Agency's subordinate tax allocation refunding bonds, merge project areas 20, approving the forms and authorizing the execution and delivery of a first supplemental trust agreement, a bond purchase agreement, a continuing disclosure agreement, one or more escrow agreements, a swap termination agreement, and documents related thereto, and authorizing and approving certain actions taken in connection therewith.
Is there a staff presentation?
Mr. Mayor, this is Joe Mortensen from Public Resources Advisory Group. We don't have a presentation, but I'll speak briefly on the item. That's okay.
Okay, that's what I'm looking for.
All right. So the item before you is to permit the city to pursue a refinancing of about $22.3 million of outstanding bonds of the successor agency and to terminate a related interest rate swap. This is a refunding for savings, and the estimated savings from the refinancing of these bonds over the life of the bonds are currently estimated to be about $13.3 million, or on a net present value basis, about $5.8 million. And that represents savings of about 26% as a percent of the refunded bonds, which is well in excess of the city's 3% threshold in the debt policy. The refinancing is going to reduce the cash flow needs of the successor agency, which will increase the amount of property tax that can be distributed out to the relevant taxing entities, including the city's general fund. And based on preliminary results, the city's share of savings over the life of the refunding issue will average about $220,000 per year through fiscal 2037. We are proposing to terminate an interest rate swap. It's called a basis swap. And there is a net cost to the termination of this swap to the tune of about $254,000 on a net present value basis. But the city would like to terminate the swap for a number of reasons, including in the swap no longer hedges a variable rate leg, so it really isn't a hedge anymore. And then in 2021, the LIBOR index will go away. And so in any event, the city would have to address that swap and amend it. And so the determination was made that because we can get out of this swap with a relatively small cost that's offset by the large savings available in this refunding, that it was a worthwhile thing to do. So that is in a nutshell the transaction that we're contemplating here. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to respond or have other members of our team respond.
Are there any questions from council members? Vice Mayor Bates.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I request this item be removed from the CC calendar for a couple of reasons. Number one, when the city is dealing with some $25 million of bond measures, I think it's important that this is not on a CC calendar, but that the council and especially the community is aware of what and how we are spending this money and the justification thereof. Now, I think we all understand with the lower interest rate, it is quite beneficial for the city to refinance at this time just for the savings. But the question has to do with that we have a number of properties that are vacated. And the question is, why aren't we looking at putting these properties on the market for development to pay for some of this debt that we have associated with a redevelopment agency? I mean, we got the Salute next door property. We have several other pieces of property. You know, we're just sitting there allowing these properties to do nothing. And we need to try to reduce our indebtedness toward this redevelopment agency. And when we do sell these properties, it's my understanding that much of it is going to be shared with the other agencies, AC Transit, the school board, all the other regional taxing groups around. So I just want a little clarity in terms of our philosophy and our process in trying to get out of debt.
Somebody want to answer that, or is that too far off our agenda item that we ought to cover it in another meeting?
So Belinda might be able to address some additional components. It's beyond what the consultants are here to do this evening. It's a really great point, and we are trying. My understanding is we have been able to at least start to gather all these properties and get all of the underlying information and any leases that we have on things or what's vacant. We didn't have a centralized system to be able to track them appropriately. So that was step one. And step two will be some sort of overall asset repositioning, just as we've been doing in the Housing Authority. And we do have a staff bandwidth issue at this point. But as a reminder to the council and the community, we have a very clear revenue chart that we are trying to make progress on all kinds of different ideas and evaluate what can be most cost effective. We're moving forward with the ballot measure this year in November. And we have this item in terms of looking at any properties the city owns on that revenue sheet to try and keep sure we make progress on moving forward on that.
So the bottom line is that the $25 million is to help to keep the city afloat, to pay our bills and obligations?
No. Belinda or Sarah, if you could please address that component. This is not new debt.
Yes, we're refinancing existing debt that is already owed by the successor agency. So this is just like refinancing your mortgage. It's allowing us to buy down the interest rate on the loan and keep a portion of the savings. The other taxing agencies will also benefit from this as well.
And what was it originally spent on?
I am not sure. I think these bonds may very well have been refunding bonds themselves. I need to look.
Susan Mayor.
Have to do, I think it might, one of it I think had to do with the rebuilding of City Hall. Was that included?
No.
I don't believe that. Those were lease revenue bonds. So this is not a debt of the city. This is the successor agency. So
is Susan Mayor on?
Yes, the 2004 B bond that is being refinanced was for the purpose of housing projects. I don't have the details as to what specific housing projects were constructed, but one of the two was a housing project. The second bond that's being proposed for refinance was the 2010 bonds. This refinanced the 2007 bonds. And again, these were for non-housing projects, but I don't have the detail on what was constructed. I believe yeah, sir.
Well, I understand what you're trying to do, but it's like purchasing a home. You get it almost paid for, you got a 30-year loan and you get 20 years, then you refinance it for another 30 years. You get down another 20 years, then you refinance it. So you keep refinancing for 50 or 60 years. At some point, we have to, fish or cut bait and pay the bonds off and get the city out of indebtedness. I don't think it's fair for the property owners to continue to pay for something that should be paid in a 30-year period of time over 60 or 70 years. And that's essentially what you do when you refinance year after year.
Councilmember Bates, just a point of clarification. When we do refinancings, we do not extend the term of the debt. It's always refinance the existing maturity. So we're not extending any.
All right, well, that's good. So the term of this new $25 million is how many years?
It goes through 2037. So it's a 17-year final term.
And when did it expire originally? You said the 2017 was. Okay, well, that's welcome to know. All right, well, thank you. I just feel that, again, when you have a $25 million indebtedness that the city, property tax and so forth have to pay for, that we have to be a little bit more clear and provide them the information in terms of what we're trying to accomplish so that we're all on the same board and we understand the process. Thank you very much. Otherwise, this would have been passed and nobody would have known anything except staff.
Vice Mayor Bates, this item was actually mistakenly placed on the consent calendar. I did contact the clerk's office today to have it moved. So we were already in the process of moving this. It wasn't going to go through on the consent because we needed to, like you said, have a conversation about it.
So One question I had is this debt was incurred by the redevelopment agency, correct?
Correct.
And so now this is this is a matter of the I guess the question I have is this the savings we have on this, is this going to be restricted to the agency, or does it go to the general fund, or what? Does it go to the successor agency, or does it go to the general fund?
The savings from the transaction is distributed out to all the taxing entities that participate in the increment, and the city's general fund is one of them. So about 28% of every year's cash flow savings.
So yeah, okay. So the savings then will mean that Richmond will get they'll get higher tax revenue than they would have gotten without it, essentially, right?
Right.
Okay.
To the tune of about $220,000 a year.
Okay. Are there any other questions from council members? Are there any public speakers?
No, I do not see any speakers.
Okay, I'd be looking for a motion.
I move the item.
Okay, motion by Councilmember Martinez. I need a second.
Second.
Second by Councilmember Choi. Call the roll, please, Madam Clerk.
Vice Mayor Bates,
Yes.
Councilmember Choi,
Yes.
Councilmember Johnson, Councilmember Johnson,
Yes, my apologies.
Councilmember Martinez,
Aye.
Councilmember Willis,
Yes.
Councilmember Willis,
Oh, sorry.
and Mayor Butt.
Yes.
So the motion passes with council members Myrick and Willis absent. Thank you. Our next agenda item will be item K1. Individuals that would like to speak on this item, please raise your hand. After I read the item into record, then that opportunity will be closed. Item K1 is to approve an employment contract with Ms. Strichter, appointing her as city attorney, providing for a 3-year term commencing November 9th, 2020, at a base salary of $235,680 annually and other specified employment terms.
Did we miss it? How about I1? Did we miss that?
I1 is part of the consent calendar.
What? Oh, I1 was on the, I'm sorry. Okay, all right. Go.
Part of the consent calendar.
Okay. Okay, all right, I'm sorry. So we're now on K1, right?
K1, and it looks like we have one speaker for this one.
Okay, first of all, there are questions from council members. Okay, I don't see any. Let's call the speakers, please.
Okay, first speaker is Mike Parker. Mike, you have 2 minutes to speak. You can go ahead and start.
I'm sorry, I wanted to speak on J1.
Okay, thank you. So no speakers.
J1 is continued. J1 is continued until October 6th. Mr. Parker.
Okay, other speakers?
None.
No other speakers.
I thought you said we had 4.
No. We do have one comment though that came in by 1 o'clock, and that comment person is in support of item K1 and requests that the council give him an award for suggesting that Coffin Associates help with the recruitment for the next.
Okay, any further questions or comments from council members? Do we have a motion?
I'll move the item.
Okay, motion by Council Member Johnson. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Martinez.
I'd like to make a statement before the vote.
Sure, go ahead.
I know the votes are there, but I have an opposition to the vote. And I've tried to be as brief as I can. And we had some good quality candidates. My number one choice was Mr. David Neuhaus. I think that's the way you pronounce his last name. This city attorney's office has been in disarray for quite some time. And all the candidates that we interviewed, I thought Mr. Neuhaus,
Vice Mayor, if I could just remind you, the other candidates' information is confidential.
Well, I thought there was one candidate that stood out above all others. When we asked him about the problems in the city attorney's office, the racism, where in fact, all 5 Black employees has filed a racial complaint against the city attorney, whereas during the tenure of this city attorney, not one African-American, not one Latino, not one Asian major firm has received a contract from the city, and we pay billions and millions of dollars to contractors every year. We asked him about dealing with that problem, and his position was that he would knock out this good old buddy network system, and that he would be an equal opportunity. The second thing is that that department needs some real leadership, and I just thought this individual provided. Lastly, at least some of us, fight for Richmond employees to be hired on for contracts on jobs and business and so forth. Here's a gentleman that resides in the city of Richmond, and we ignored that. How can we ask other agencies, companies to hire Richmond, and we turn around and do this to a person who resides in the city of Richmond? So for those reasons, I cannot in good conscience vote for the candidate that's being recommended and probably going to get selected. So I just wanted the public to understand why I'm not voting in that direction. Thank you.
Any other comments from council members? Councilmember Martinez.
Yes, I agree with what Bates says, but I think one of the major problems that we have in our legal department is the cost of our legal department. And in hiring this person, we are actually hiring a Cadillac lawyer with a Honda budget. But I believe that she will clean up our overstaffed legal department, because if we compare the cost of our legal department with other legal departments in cities, you will find that we have a top-heavy legal department. And so hopefully we'll be able to ameliorate the amount of money that we're paying this lawyer with a downsizing of our legal department.
Any other comments from council members? Did I already ask if we had public speakers, Madam Clerk? I forgot maybe, huh?
Yes, we do not have any.
Okay. Okay, we had a motion, a second, right?
Motion by Councilmember Johnson, second by Councilmember Martinez.
Right, okay. Call the roll call vote, please.
Vice Mayor Bates?
No.
Councilmember Choi?
Yes.
Councilmember Johnson?
Yes.
Councilmember Martinez?
Yes.
Councilmember Willis?
My internet messed up. This is the bond issue, right?
This is for the
lawyer.
City attorney.
Oh yeah, the city attorney, yes.
And Mayor Butt.
Yes.
Motion passes with Councilmember Myrick absent and Vice Mayor Bates voting no. Our next item is item K2. Individuals that would like to speak on this item, please raise your hand right now, please. K2 is to receive an update on the status of the reimagining police and public safety process. Provide feedback on a possible future consultation and facilitation services agreement with Circle Up Education and consider appointment methodology recommendation to form a 21-member task force. It looks like we have 2 speakers for this item.
City manager, you want to start this out?
Sure, and I will keep this very brief, just because tonight is just, again, a little bit of an update and process question about how the city can move forward with a city process. And there have been, as you all know, there have been an incredible number of conversations over the past couple of months trying to address systemic racism and all kinds of awful things that we want to correct and do our part here in Richmond. Police Commission has hosted a forum, a public forum. The Mayor's Ad Hoc Committee hosted a public forum. Our police department has done some things. The NAACP has. There have been some meetings that have not been open community forums, but a number of folks are interested in forming coalitions about developing recommendations. And we want to, again, tie this into a process to lead to specific recommendations for the City Council to consider as part of the budget process for the next fiscal year. So these would be in the spring and early summer timeframe, finishing up by the end of June. So in order to support a process that includes a full conversation with all interested community members, we're doing a couple of things internally. One of them is developing an internal support team to support a task force, a designated task force. And that group is going to be able to help provide information and data and be thought partners and help with brainstorming and do logistics like set up meetings, that kind of thing. This is going to be led by Sal Vaca, our community services director. And again, he's going to be supported by folks that are from almost every department, a team of about 10 different people. There's also a recommendation that we'd like some feedback on, that there should be some professional facilitation, at least for broad community sessions that can be paired with an actual task force as we move forward with this process, so that there's a neutral outside facilitator, again, to help with some session design and make sure that everyone's voice is heard. And in terms of a specific task force, as folks know, this is the purview, according to our charter, of the mayor. And I think the mayor would like to do something a little bit different than we do most often. So Mayor, would you like to address that? And you're muted, sir.
Thank you. So what I'm suggesting is that that each council member will recommend 3 individuals, and then I will appoint those individuals to the task force. That would give us a task force of 21 people. And considering the diversity on our council, I think that we'll probably pretty well cover the bases in terms of getting good participation citywide. Anyway, that's my proposal. You know, if we pass this tonight, as soon as we get recommendations from every council member, then I will make the appointments. And then, of course, they'll have to be approved by the city council after that, by the entire city council. City manager, do you want to talk about our consultant now, or?
Yeah, so we're not asking for specific action on the consultant. It's a concept about just looking for general feedback about the concept of professional facilitation. And if there's comments there's a particular consultant that has come to our attention by the work they've done in other cities, and that has been used one time here in Richmond with Circle Up Education that specializes in this type of work.
Okay, so as the city manager said, this is not an action item, but does anybody have any questions or comments about the process that we recommended for selecting a task force? Councilmember Willis.
Yeah, thank you. Respectfully, just because of how controversial the topic is, I wouldn't want to leave it to just appointments personally. And this is only just seeing how organically and free flow and the homeless task force has been. And I think it's been very successful in a lot of its work. And it didn't have, no really structure besides a facilitator and just meeting notices and pure agendas, which have made it move on very smoothly. I'm just wondering, because I think there was a conversation about hiring a consultant, if we're thinking about doing an RFP for that kind of consultant too, just so we're able to get feedback on what we want to see in terms of somebody who's focusing on working with us on reimagining public safety and what that actually looks like.
Do you want to respond to that, city manager, about the consultant, or?
And I can take my answer offline too, but I wanted to put that out there.
Yeah, and that is something that we're happy to discuss, and it is something the city council has an option of being able to do sole source. We're checking in with our full purchasing policy too, and it is something that there's a trade-off, a little bit of a trade-off in terms of the process and the timing. So we know that we all want to keep these conversations going and have enough time for full discussion to be able to make recommendations early enough to be effective in our budget process next year. And so we absolutely could go through a more extensive process to choose that facilitator. Just keep in mind that it will continue to delay some of the process and some of those discussions.
Thank you.
Councilmember Martinez.
Yes, I understand that that this organization conducted a workshop for the city on August 27th. How was that organized, and how much did it cost the city?
So the Mayor's Ad Hoc Task Force conducted this open community session primarily to get input on what types of topics the community wanted to discuss in the future, and express any additional information they wanted to express, and sort of make comments on how they wanted a process to move forward. So it was about structure, not about decisions. And that was less than $5,000.
Okay, so it was, from what I hear, it was organized by the mayor task force, and the mayor's task force is composed of.
No, so there's no task force yet. That's part of what we're discussing here this evening.
Well, then who organized it?
Well, there was I think I can answer that. So there is an ad hoc council committee that at this point in time consists of the vice mayor and myself. And we worked with the police chief, the city manager, and some other city staff, and put this together. And the main objective was to solicit suggestions from people about, or to get questions from people and solicit suggestions from people that we could act on later on. It was not intended to make any policies or even answer any questions. So the full, yeah.
Okay, and which budget did this $5,000 come from?
The city manager's budget. Mm-hmm.
City manager's budget. Okay, thank you. Now, I was looking at the contract, and the contract is the boilerplate contract that we have with all people, but there was one issue that was quite interesting to me, and it's on the inspection. So it says that if the project or services set forth in Exhibit A shall be performed on city or other public property, city shall have the right to inspect such work without notice. If such projects or services shall not be performed on city or other public property, city shall have the right to inspect such work upon reasonable notice. So my question is, when services are conducted online, therefore both in the city and elsewhere, what are the boundaries concerning the right to inspect without notice? That might be a question.
Yeah, I think it's an attorney question, because as you mentioned, this is boilerplate language standard in all of our agreements. And so maybe helping understand the specific concern about what you would like to inspect would help us be able to better give you a better answer.
Yeah, our rights in terms of inspection. I mean, it wouldn't be part of the contract if it wasn't a concern for the city.
Yeah, that generally is referring to things like construction work or things where there's actually is a physical site. And I don't know, Rachel, if we've addressed this in terms of remote type of work.
Yeah, and actually it's more than that because it refers to intellectual property.
Right, and I think that the terms of this contract haven't been finalized yet.
Right.
So-
Okay. Well, I just wanted to bring that to your notice so that that's something that you might consider since it's important for the city to be able to inspect and information that takes place in the city of Richmond. So I think that's a definition that needs to be figured out. My other question has to do with the proposed services. Looking through it, it's almost $20,000. You know, that's a lot of money, and they break it up into units of 50 minutes, and they suggest 5 units for the community town hall. So that would be 2 sessions at $7,000 a session, and each session would be what 1.5. It would be about an hour and 5 minutes. So we're paying $7,000 for an hour and 7 minutes of actual online time, and then there's another $6,000 for coaching. And so my question is, how will DEI be informed of key stakeholders, and how will they be chosen? And then how will they be coached? Because I'm not sure. It says 12.5 units, so each unit is 50 minutes. So you can do the math, or I could do it for you. I have my phone here, but I'm wondering, how will that coaching be done? Has that been thought out?
So in terms of I think the underlying, so in terms of, again, we want to make sure that it is a transparent, fair, open process for everybody. And in terms of, one of your questions, I believe, was around how will stakeholders, for instance, be chosen? And this is a general framework. This is the exact kind of feedback that we're looking for in terms of, what do we want to modify in the scope, that kind of thing. And the city attorney was correct. We do not have this finalized yet. That's why we're seeking feedback tonight. And that would actually be the direction that Sal would need to look. Sal would need to, and part of it is he hasn't had enough chance to weigh in and look at exactly what he and his team would need to do to facilitate this process. We also have some, there's a trade-off here between how much outside assistance we get and what we can afford. And so this, the draft kind of initial brainstorming that's here for discussion is not set in stone, number one. And it also, number two, is designed to get some support, but not designed to do all of the work. That's what our internal city staff would be doing in conjunction with the various community partners.
Okay, so my question still remains: what sort of coaching, and how would that coaching be meted out among the sheriff?
My understanding is that it wasn't so much as coaching as it was about helping with session design. How do we do an input session or a listening session where everybody has, feels valuable and has enough time to make their information known, and that we're not trying to coach people in terms of, again, I think this was probably some boilerplate language from them too, in terms of what they often do, but this wasn't designed to tell anybody what to do or to say.
Right, yeah. Coaching has a lot of connotations, and I wasn't referring to the leading thought. I was talking about what they actually have down here, which is helping panelists prepare their presentations and talking points. And, so the question is, with 12.5 units, how is that time divided among the panelists? How are the panelists chosen? And what it really comes down to is $20,000 best spent using an outside consultant, or is it better used letting our citizens police review committee use that money to prepare a town hall, since our citizens review committee are the ones who have spent more time on police issues and have a better understanding of exactly what might be needed.
So I'm trying to bring this back to kind of where we are. And again, this is not an action item. I think the city manager is looking for some suggestions and guidance from council members. So we have kind of three items to look at. One of them is I guess whether or not you want an appointed task force following the direction of the city council. And I can only talk to two council members. I've talked to a couple, and they were okay with it. So that's one question, I guess. Do you want an appointed task force? And the suggested way of forming one, is that okay? The second question is, do you want a facilitator for these workshops? And the way we ended up with Tiffany is that she, about 2 weeks before we did ours, maybe a little more, she had done one for the city of Hercules and had gotten very good reviews from the Hercules city council members. And so we asked her to come do the same thing for ours. And I think she did a really good job. And so as we do future ones, she's going to have less of a learning curve. And I think she can be more effective. If people want to start from scratch and put an RFP out, we can do that also. And then I guess the other thing is questions about what should be the scope of work in the consultant's contract. And we've heard a couple of suggestions already from council members Martinez and Willis. So kind of what's your pleasure? Does somebody want to, Vice Mayor Bates?
Well, I thought the idea that was proposed was a compromise, and one that the entire council would hopefully support. No one in this city or in this country has a utopia on how to deal with police and problems that we are facing, Black Lives Matters or whatever you want to call it. The police commission is not an expert on all of these issues. So the idea was for each council member to select 3 members to be inclusive and to work collectively to try to evaluate and come forward with some recommendations. That's something like, 3 times 7, a 21-member board. And you're going to get all sorts of ideas and different opinions. But hopefully in the end, they would come to a conclusion of how we should proceed. That's the democratic process.
So
and to try to,
I'm sorry.
And to sort of single out this group or that group, they know hardly any more than anyone else. So that's what the idea that I thought the mayor and the city manager was proposing, which I supported. And I thought this council would embrace that and say, hey, I'll have 3 individuals I can appoint, will represent what I consider a wide viewpoint of the problems in the city and the solutions. So I'm disappointed to hear all of this question about $20,000. My goodness, that's peanuts considering what we hope to have a solution and a recommendation is going to come forward. I don't understand why we going to get hung up on $20,000. And let's look at hopefully the results, which would be probably much more valuable than $25,000 or $50,000. So that's my conclusion, and I support the city manager and the mayor's recommendation.
Councilmember Johnson.
I also support it, but I have some questions. But first, I wanted to offer my feedback on the idea of hiring a consultant if we were to move forward with this agenda item. Because this is such a a hot button issue and there's a lot of emotions attached on both sides. I think it would be best to bring in a third party to facilitate. I also agree with Councilmember Willis that it should go out, should go out to bid to see, so we can get the best individual. And that's no shade to Tiffany or what she did in Hercules. I just think with something, once again, so precious as this, we ought to see see all of the options that's on the table. And I guess the last comment or question that I had in regards to this agenda item, because there were some, some people brought up the CPRC, and I see one of the speakers that we have up is a member of the CPRC. And I was just wondering, would they also be up to be, could they also be nominated to be on this 21-member task force as well?
I see no reason why if a council member wants to nominate a member of the CPRC, I think that's fine.
And I think a hybrid version of that would be a council member might want to nominate maybe a group, something like CPRC. And if the council member was comfortable with it, have that group, nominate their own spokesperson. It would still have to, in the current model that's proposed, those people would still have to come through a specific council member as a recommendation to the mayor.
So does anybody have any objections to that process of forming a task force?
We do have some speakers too, yeah.
I'm sorry, more than one person was speaking at once. Does anybody have an objection to that process?
We have two speakers, Mr. Mayor. That's what the city manager and I were trying to bring to your attention.
Oh, public speakers. Okay. Well, we can bring this back for discussion. Why don't we hear the public speakers, then we'll bring it back for further discussion, okay?
Okay.
Two speakers, and they'll have 2 minutes each.
Okay. First speaker is Randy Joseph. Randy, you have 2 minutes to speak. You can go ahead and start. Randy?
Yes. My name is Randy Joseph. I am a Richmond resident and I am part of the Richmond Community Police Review Commission. I am a commissioner. I'm also part of a group called Richmond Reimagining Public Safety that has been working since before June to come up with solutions to present before the city council on how to make changes and to how to better reimagine public safety in the city. Some of the things that I've heard that I'm really confused about is that there was a motion that was passed on June 30th to form a task force to come together, and they were supposed to meet within 2 weeks after that June 30th meeting, and that has never sufficed. And there was already 6 groups already recommended to be part of that group that never came forward and never got taken care of. The second thing that I want to talk about is to have Circle Up. I think it needs to go to an RFP especially we can look for better. I do agree that we do need neutral facilitation. It needs to be somewhere in our city who knows our city problems, not for somebody from the outside, and making sure that gets done. And for me, I'm more successful at having like the homelessness task force to have community members come and be a part of the process rather than just having a select few people be a part of this process, because this is a big process. This has been going on for way too long, and we only focus on one part of safety. We only say safety is police, which is not the case. What's the case is that so many other things you consider safety, like housing and food and parks and schools and all that goes further to that. And I think we missed that part. So we need more inclusiveness in this. So my recommendation would be more of a the homelessness task force, how community would just show up and be part of the process. And with our process, we've had over 45 people working on this, and to narrow that down to 21 isn't fair to the community members who've already been doing the work and doing this process for a long time. Thank you.
Thank you. Our second speaker is Benjamin Terrio. Benjamin, you have 2 minutes to speak. You can go ahead and start.
Ontario Richmond POA, reimagining policing. The POA is in support of this concept, which is not defunding. Defunding has been occurring for the past 5 years. We commend all the conversations that have been occurring on this issue in the city. They have affirmed the public wants serious discussions on policing, but they clearly do not want defunding. We think there are amazing learning and teaching moments for the public that will be properly addressed. Please nominate people who actually have a sincere desire to ensure public safety and provide the community policing that our city has come to expect, but has been robbed of in recent years. If you're going to reimagine policing, though, you need to know some basics, and I have some for you tonight. Melvin Willis last week during an adjournment, realizing other people were speaking on adjournments and shout outs, you talked about homicides and homicides victims. And you mentioned that one had occurred in the Belding Woods, which you obviously conveniently have moved to for office. It's a very thoughtful gesture, but I want to help you out because you shouldn't be showing up giving shout outs to victims of crime when you don't understand who they are. So let me help you out, all those people who want to reimagine policing, but you can't remember the names of residents who have been felled by violence in our city. And you're more worried about a hearing than the mayor's task force put on than the actual names. Here are the names of residents of Richmond residents murdered in 2020. Listen up. Anthony Ramsey, Ruby Wallach, Norvi Dizadorna, Daryl Gibson, Mark Randall, Juan Valdivinos, Daniel Hernandez, Jose Salazar, Maurice Jackson, Claudia Justiniani, Eric Galliana, Jelani Blasher, and Yuri Lopez. Oh, and we've had 70 plus shootings, which are just unsuccessful murders. So please write that down for the record next time before you stumble and bumble on the dais. The victims and their families deserve that. Thank you.
That was the last speaker.
Okay, so taking it back to the council.
And a quick comment to respond. I do appreciate actually. Quick comment to respond. I do appreciate hearing those names because unfortunately, when I do get the homicide calls on all my phones, there's never an identified person on who it is. And I don't always thank you for actually sharing that public to know because I would like to hear the names. And there's a lot of issues that are impacting us too that I'm also involved in too. So personally, I'd rather stumble and bumble on the dais and not give any acknowledgement to the lives that have been lost. And I do appreciate the work that RPD has been able to do when it comes to solving some of the homicides that have been solved. And hopefully a lot of other families can get that closure too.
Okay. Again, is there anybody objects to setting up this 21 person task force with nominations by council members? Vice Mayor Bates?
As I indicated, I think it's a good idea. But I think this council needs to set some scope of what we're going to be discussing and coming up with recommendations. You can't come up with recommendations that consist of everything in the city that's wrong. Many of the situations in this city we have no control over. Mental health, the school, the education system. We have zero control or authority. So I would hope that whatever this task force is eventually selected to do is to focus upon working effectively with the police department and not everything Tom, Dick, and Harry within the city. Otherwise, you're going to have a dysfunctional board, committee where people are going to be disappointed and disgusted, and they're going to create more chaos than a solution.
Okay, so the next item had to do with a consultant, whether we continue with the consultant that we used for that first workshop or whether we put out an RFP. And I think one major consideration is the time frame. If we go out for an RFP, it's going to delay the process by, maybe 6 weeks or a couple of months or something along those lines. So again, I'm kind of looking for an unofficial consensus here. Maybe I'll just ask, how many of you are okay with proceeding with the consultant that we've already identified?
I support it.
Okay, and anybody else support it? I see Councilmember Choi. I would support her. I think she did a really good job. That's 3 of us. How many of you want to start from scratch and go out for an RFP? I see Councilmember Johnson, Willis, Martinez. I don't know. It's tied. It's a tie. It's tied. So I'm not sure where we go with this.
Can I have a suggestion?
Sure.
Would it be, is it kosher to have a closed session about this matter? Because I know what final positions everybody's taking, but I don't know why. You know, it's not really possible for us to talk about this offline. The only way I can think of would be a closed session.
We can talk about it now.
You could bring it back to an open session next week with the 7 members. I'm not aware of any closed session safe harbor that this would fall under. I don't think there's threatened litigation or real estate negotiation or any of the closed session.
It's a personnel matter, and the council do have the authority to go into executive session to discuss a personnel matter.
It's a contract. It needs to be discussed in
It's a contract matter, not a personnel matter.
So, did this organization do the presentation for the League of Cities? So there was a presentation done by the League of Cities around implicit bias. And I was wondering if this was the same organization.
So I saw one of those, I think there were 2 different presentations at the California League of Cities, and this was not the organization that presented for the one that I saw.
Okay, well,
it was a national organization.
Well, they did a fantastic job in seeing what they did and not knowing what circle R.
Yeah, the scopes of work are different. So the presentation that I believe you're referring to was an informational session. It wasn't a facilitation process. And so the scope of work that's contemplated with an outside professional facilitator is for a neutral, unbiased party to be able to just help make sure our process is designed well. They would not be presenting any information. That would be for the stakeholders, for the community members, for staff members. Those are the folks who would actually be coming up with content and actually presenting. The facilitator would not be doing that part.
Okay, so their role would simply be to facilitate.
Correct, yeah.
And we would be paying them $20,000 to do
Yeah,
that.
and honestly, that doesn't cover a full, what I would call a full facilitated process. So it contemplated a more community input sessions similar to what's done, in my opinion, like with the homeless task force, and that those are open to anybody, you know, to come in and have a conversation. It's more difficult now since that still has to be online as opposed to being able to have in-person meetings. And so that would be one main component. There could be a potential with some of the hours, with some of the time, to actually help facilitate a process with a dedicated task force if the council chooses to move forward with a dedicated task force. So it'd be a hybrid process to bring together open, you know, full community meetings with everybody for full conversations in conjunction with the task force that would actually be given the goal of being the specific group to represent the community, to give specific recommendations to the city council in the new year. So it's really kind of how I think I think as a staff member, I do have some concerns about just having endless open-ended conversations, because I'm not sure how to bring together then a specific set of recommendations for the council's consideration. A lot of the work with the homeless task force is everyone keeping their eyes and ears open for grant money, for how to kind of, you know, move that grant money in the right direction to help the most, to get feedback. And with this particular process, we're looking to make very clear next steps and changes in our budget and how we provide services. And one of the things that I keep talking about is in looking at how we provide services. In my opinion, it is beyond police services. And there's really three components to that. You have the breadth, because we have a structural budget problem also, as you all keep hearing about, and we'll hear a lot more about next week. So in terms of services, there's really three components. What is the breadth of services that we are providing? You know, what are the specific services that we are delivering to the community? What level of services are we providing? You know, how many people are providing those services? How many hours of the day are they being provided? You know, what's the quantity of service? And then the third component is service delivery model. You know, is it direct staff directly providing services? Is it through another agency that we contract with or we give grant money to in the city? Is it another outside agency that we contract with, like the county or something like that? So there's really all three components in that discussion. And it's something that we would really want people to dedicate some time and understanding to be able to help develop the recommendations.
Okay, and talking about helping to develop recommendations, has GARE been part of the conversation?
Yeah, so that is so I mentioned this internal support team, and that's part of the conversation we want to have with them, because there's also some additional work that GARE has been able to do with our own staff and an upcoming training that's coming up to be able to do good community engagement with the community. And that's
okay.
Fundamental underlying training that would help us in this process and many other processes that we work with.
Well, they not only do they do training, they do facilitation. Do you think that they might be one of the organizations that could be considered?
Yeah, sure. So the difference in this case is, again, the staff recommendation, and that's what we're seeking feedback on, is an outside neutral facilitator. A staff member who participates in GARE doesn't meet that particular set of criteria.
Well, I disagree. I think I think the staff member has been quite non-biased. So, okay, thank you.
So to try to move this on, so I think that we'll formalize this, but I will ask now each council member to recruit and solicit your three recommendations for the task force, and we'll follow up on that. As far as whether to continue with our existing facilitation consultant or get a new one, I assume that Councilmember Myrick will come back. Maybe he'll be back next week. Anybody know? If he comes back next week, maybe he can break the tie and we'll have a direction on that. So maybe let's put this back on the agenda for discussion only next week. Okay.
Okay. And in the meantime, I'll ask staff to do some work as to how quickly we think we could get an RFP process done.
Yeah. Okay. So have we covered all the items we need to cover, city managers? Okay. All right. Anybody have any final comments on this before we move on? Okay, hearing none. So we have a final item, right, that we...
Yes, item H7. Individuals that would like to speak on this item, please raise your hand now by pressing the raise hand button, or if you're joining by phone, press the *9. Item H7 is to adopt an ordinance for second reading, rezoning the project site to a Point Pilati planned area district with historic district overlay for the Winehaven Historic District, and adopt an ordinance for second reading approving a development agreement. Looks like we have 5 speakers for this item.
Are there any questions from council members? I could ask for a staff presentation, but we spent hours and hours on this a week ago. And if somebody has some new question, now's the time to ask it. Councilmember Martinez.
Yes. We didn't have a chance to discuss strategic economics peer review of the economic policy, economic evaluation that was given to us by SunCal. And there were a lot of questions that were raised, and I'm curious as to how I'm curious as to what sort of response we could have to those, to the differences between the two studies.
Sure, we'd be happy to address any specific questions. If not, then I'll ask David, our consultant from BAE, if he could just provide a summary of their review. So I believe he's in the room.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, David, do you just want to provide some brief talking points regarding your review of the strategic economics memo?
Yes, I can do that. We took a look at the peer review that they prepared, and we found several issues with the analysis that I'll just quickly go over. If you have follow-up questions, I'd be happy to answer. So the first issue with the analysis was their assumed home prices, and there are several comments that we have on how they came up with home prices. First, they included sales that were older from 2016 to 2017 and didn't update them when they're coming up with their base value. And normally you would make an adjustment for time to account for subsequent appreciation, which this market experienced until the COVID crisis. The second comment on home prices.
Very quickly, how would those prices affect their evaluation?
Well, if you adjusted for time, it would raise their base value. So they made a bunch of discounts starting with a base value. And so the base value would start at a higher point.
And do you have any idea what that higher point might be?
No, because I have several other comments to go through. And so the other big issue, and it's probably more of a methodological issue here, is we think they double discounted for the Chevron effect. In their memo, they talked about doing a discount of 8% due to proximity to the Chevron refinery facility. And they quoted a study that was done, I think, in 2015 as their documentation for that assumption. The problem is that the sales they used are within 2 miles of the Chevron facility, Point Richmond and the Brickyard area. And the Brickyard's just at that 2 mile point.
Can you show me where in their study you find that doubling of?
It's in there, I think.
I'd like to see it.
Excuse me?
I'd like to see it. So can you show me where it's at?
Oh. Hold on. It's the section starting on page 9.
Okay.
And if you go to page 10, the last paragraph, reduction of baseline property values to account for proximity to refinery.
Okay, so it's actually on page 10 and 11.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, yes, okay.
So what they do there is they make based on that study, they make a 8% discount from their base value. The problem is the sales that they used are already within a 2 mile radius of the plant, and they would already effectively reflect a discount to the market. So to take another discount is methodologically inappropriate in our opinion, because you're already starting out with pricing that would reflect any such effect.
And where does it say they start with that the first discount?
The first discount, they do a base value, and they did do an 8% discount for refinery.
Right, but you're saying that their first discount includes a discount for the refinery, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so where does it include that?
Excuse me?
Where does it say that that's included in the first discount?
Well, they set up the assumption on page 10 and 11, as you saw. And then
right. So that's one discount. I'm asking, where is the other discount?
Oh, they make several discounts, and I'll get to those.
Okay,
So-
well, right now I'm talking about the discount for the refinery. Where is the first discount for the refinery?
Oh, if you look on their table in the back
What page?
of the base, they take an 8% discount.
I'm sorry, I'm trying to find it here. What page?
Hold on, looking.
Yeah, I like to deal with facts.
So if you look on table 7, which is on page 14,
Okay, hold on.
you'll see that they have a baseline, for example, the single family home at 1.3 million. And then you'll say price discount for base on refinery is the second line, and that's 8%. And so the 1.3 million is dropped to rounded 1.2 million.
Okay, so that's one time, and you're saying that whatever is on page 10.
In other words, the 8% discount you see on page 7 is documented by their statements on page 10 and 11.
Right. Yeah. So they're referring to in this table. They're referring to what is on page 10 and 11. So it's only once, not twice. Just because they refer to it twice doesn't mean that they're counting it twice.
So
No,
what I
but
heard, yeah, there we go.
that's not our point, actually. What we're saying is that
what's your point?
The 1.3 million itself already reflects a discount for the refinery proximity, if there is such an effect. Because you have an active market within 2 miles of Chevron today in Point Richmond and in the Brickyard area, where you have home sales occurring. And so the prices recorded reflect any buyer discount for the refinery effect.
Okay, so I'm trying to understand what you're saying. So you're saying that it includes a 2-mile radius, the discount, is that correct?
Yeah, that's based on page 10 and 11 of their analysis. They made the statement. So what I looked at was, well, how close are all these sales? Point Richmond is well within 2 miles. The Brickyard is 2 miles and slightly closer.
Okay, so okay, so the bottom's property, that's which is what we're talking about. Is that within 2 miles?
Which property?
The bottom's project, the Shea Homes.
Water line.
They're at the edge. They're like just 2.1 miles. So they're very close.
Okay, so, right, but they're not within the 2-mile zone.
Depends
which
on
means that they're not being counted. So it's only being counted once, not twice, as you are arguing.
Well, if you look at, they have more sales than just the water line, and the water line is basically within that 2-mile radius.
Oh, but it's not within the 2-mile radius, so it's not part of the 2-mile radius, which means that if we only consider the water line, how does that affect the rate?
Well, you wouldn't consider only the water line because we look at all the home sales in Point Richmond. And when you look at the assumed price,
but if you're counting the double assessment, then you would only count the water line property.
No, you wouldn't.
Why not?
What we're talking about is we're going to get to the discount for assessments. That's another comment that we have that we think is inappropriate.
Okay, well, I don't agree.
The price they're starting with, and then the 8% discount.
Okay, well, you haven't shown me that the 8% discount is counted twice.
Well, I'm sorry.
I think it's okay. Hey, you know, this is going around and around. I think
we're trying to clarify. It's going to go round and
I know,
round
but we're
until it's
not.
clear.
We're not getting anywhere. I understand.
Well, we are getting somewhere.
Well, let me tell you what I think he's saying is that it's like a comp. Okay, so you look at Point Richmond, which is clearly within the 2-mile radius. You've got a sale of 1.3 million, say, and then what this report is doing is saying, okay, because it's near Chevron, we're going to discount that by 8%. What he's saying is that it's already near Chevron, and the sales price has already reflected that discount. So I think
Right.
I think it's
I
time for you guys.
understand. I understand what he said, and the other point is that we're talking about sales of properties comparable to the properties that will be at Point Melati. That would be the water line. So the water line is not within that within that 2 miles, which means that it's not being double counted when we count the sales at water line.
Well, a tenth of a mile is insignificant. I mean, I think
Well,
you guys
maybe
ought
to
to just,
you,
you guys ought to
it
agree
might
to
be to you,
disagree.
but
Let's move on.
statistically, it's not.
Well, 2 miles is arbitrary anyway, you know, so.
Okay, well then.
Yeah, we're just basing it on the one study that they did cite. The other broader
Okay.
point on the pricing is that Point Richmond itself has a lot of higher end homes. And if you look at the pricing proposed for the project versus even just the Point Richmond home sales, its pricing fits within the spectrum of prices that you see out there. And that's all within, well within the 2 mile radius. So that was our first comment.
Okay, I consider it moot, but go ahead.
That's okay. The second discount is they bring out several factors that lead them to a lower base value, including fire insurance and exiting issues, as well as a lack of amenities, including retail. And what they don't do is to substantiate how that on a percentage basis impacts their translation of the sales that they pick into the base value that they put on their table 7. And if you look at the other side, which is the premiums for views, water access, open space proximity, and master plan community, those are very well documented studies showing the impact of those positive attributes. So they did not include any information on the positive side, included information that leads them to lower the value, the base value, but we don't know by how much, without citing any specific study that would lead them to a discount. So that's another general point. The final point on the pricing relates to the discounting for taxes. And our comment there is that they're assuming, due to the lower values, which we would take issue with, that the total assessments of real property taxes would exceed 2%. But if the city attorney and outside counsel can confirm this, basically the agreements say they can't charge for the initial price of the home, these total taxes can't be more than 2% of the home value. So and that would limit the amount of CFD or the community facilities district financing they could do, and they'd have to finance through other mechanisms. So the discount we think is inappropriate for the CFD charges, which they show is over 2%, because your agreements themselves wouldn't allow that. So through that setting of a base value, taking 8% and then further discounting it for the CFD or the over 2% total tax charges, they come up with significantly lower values that then influences the findings that they made.
Okay, so do you have additional questions?
Well, I don't think he's finished.
I have 3 more comments
I'm sorry, go ahead.
on the methodology. On the absorption side, they state that it'll take up to 20 years based on their estimate of absorption for the project to be sold out. And they used single project sales, some condos in downtown Oakland primarily, and they showed, well, this project had a certain number of sales per month, that's other project. But what they didn't look at is that this is a master plan community that would have multiple projects online at the same time with different price points, different product types. One might be condos, the other would be single family homes. And so you get different projects, each generating a certain sales per month. And so you have to look at the whole project, not make your absorption based on a project by project assumption, which is what they did.
Well, no, they did theirs on a timeline. You did yours at one moment, which is, if we were living in a science fiction world where we could stop time and have everything done, your analysis would work, but we can't do that.
Well, I have a comment on that as well, but let me get to that. So that's our general point in absorption is we think that they set their assumption on an unrealistic view of how a master plan community would operate. The other is about their costs. As you know, they had about $1 million higher cost threshold in their peer review. And what they did is they moved, it appeared to be the cost for open space and some of the service community facilities district costs onto the city. But again, that's not consistent with the documents that the city would be signing and the developer would be signing up to. So we think that's an improper escalation of the cost, which then
how is it not consistent?
Because those costs by the DDA and the DA, and again, the city attorney and outside counsel can confirm this, say that those costs must be borne by the developer. So it's developer's risk if the costs are not what they project. And then finally, the last comment is really missing revenues. This is very important. The strategic analysis didn't consider the one-time property transfer sales taxes that would occur from Winehaven to Orton and then Winehaven to other home builders. And these would be potentially significant amounts. And then they also didn't include the initial sale to what I call the first generation home buyer from the home builder to the home buyer. Both the EPS analysis that Winehaven provided and the strategic analysis include transfer taxes for second generation resales, but not the initial sale. Or EPS provided the initial sales estimates, but the strategic did not. And so they're not showing the actual year by year cash flow that those transfer taxes would result in. And then
well, neither did you.
Well, we didn't prepare any. We are peer reviewers. So my firm, BAE, peer reviewed the EPS Winehaven study, and then we also took a brief look at the strategic study. So we haven't actually prepared a fiscal analysis. We are using our experience having prepared them for other jurisdictions to look at both of these analyses. So we're trying to, and we have critiques on both, and so on the strategic side, they also, in citing that they thought a year-by-year analysis would be superior, they themselves did not include the ad valorem and other assessments that would be paid by the home builders for unbuilt lots and unsold homes, because they have to pay property taxes on that. And to be fair, neither the EPS or the strategic analysis included that. But if you're going to switch to a year-by-year analysis of tax revenue in and costs going out, you have to include that because that's an element of what you get in reality.
Okay, so what I'm hearing from you is that both studies are inadequate.
No, we feel that if I'm going on strategic, I'm saying let's take strategic at its face. They themselves put 2 points in time. They just picked a different first point. So the EPS study said, here's what the situation is at the end of phase 1. And strategic said, here's what the situation is in year 4, but with lower home prices, slower absorption, and higher costs. So that on its face didn't ring right, in terms of analysis. Also, if you're going to critique the Winehaven for being a point in time, they didn't show a year-by-year analysis either. And if they had, they would have had to put in these other revenue sources so that you really got a whole picture of cash flow to the city. That is.
And you're actually making my point. I think that to move forward without a year-by-year analysis is not doing the city fiscal service. I'm really interested in making sure that the city remains fiscally whole, and I don't want to dream of thousands, millions of dollars coming in on a scenario that's not possible.
Yeah, we, as part of our work for you in the city, we looked at the DDA and the DA precisely for these points, and we really did a risk analysis to say, what are the risks that these agreements pose? And we were very satisfied from our third-party vantage point at looking at the fiscal assumptions made by the Winehaven fiscal analysis flowed through to the documents that are up before the city council in terms of there not being a risk to the general fund to the city.
Okay,
So that was our basic finding, and our overall finding on the strategic study is that it was materially deficient in many regards in how it came up with its estimates.
okay, so the first one is not materially deficient?
No, we concurred with the findings that.
Right, but you're saying that it was not materially deficient. Is that correct?
Yeah, they used and the strategic analysis acknowledged that the point, looking at points in time on a fiscal is a widely accepted approach to doing fiscal analyses. And and they themselves did that.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
So no, that's the end of my comments.
Okay, well, a lot of things that are accepted are not adequate. I mean, if we look at our president, enough people accept what he's doing, and it's not adequate, and it's not just. And so anything we look at, we need to look at with lenses that will protect the citizens of Richmond. So what I'm hearing you say is that the study done by the people hired by SunCal was adequate, that they provided all the information that you need in order to make an assessment that there are no risks to the city of Richmond. Is that correct?
Yeah, as shown also in the DDA and DA documents, because we had limiting conditions saying, as long as the DDA and the DA have protective language, then what the Winehaven fiscal analysis is showing would be correct.
Okay, well, you really haven't convinced me that that strategic is deficient, especially when you consider the fact that the other study is not deficient. But I'm really concerned about protecting the city, and so let's just say that strategic was correct and the other wasn't. How will the city be protected from an annual loss of 4.4 million from the general fund if worse came to worse?
Yeah, good. Would either the city attorney or outside counsel like to comment first, or?
Christian Marsh is in the meeting, who's our outside counsel on the DA, and I believe that Carlos Pravat can speak to the DDA, although the council approved the DDA last week, so that's not before the council at this meeting.
No, we're not voting on it, but we are trying to understand it.
Sure, I just wanted to clarify, but
okay.
Christian can speak to the protections in the DA, and Carlos can answer questions, and Christian can provide some information about the DDA as well as Carlos Pravat.
Council, and thank you, Christian Marsh, your outside counsel on the DA and on the CEQA side. So there are, a number of protections and provisions that do impose the cost obligations or other flexibility for the city to increase assessments, increase fees, to limit the city's obligations for costs. I mean, they're sprinkled throughout the development agreement. And I would just note, for example, in section 4.2, as to assessment financing, we have a provision there that talks about there being no obligation for the financing mechanisms to obligate the city's general fund or negatively impact the general fund. We have another provision in 4.2.1 about not impacting the city's general funds, and in other sections of the DA as well. I think, generally speaking, the DA and the DDA identify a number of public benefits which are going to be obligations of the developer, not of the city. And those public benefits, many of which are primarily identified in a part of the DDA, but are then carried through. Some of those are carried through and identified in the development agreement as well in section, it's Article 2, actually, section 2.1, starting in that section, including the master infrastructure, police and fire station, some of the offsite improvements. I know we talked a bit about the Bay Trail improvements. And I would just note that some of these are above and beyond what you would normally be able to charge a private developer as part of fees or assessments or under the Mitigation Fee Act or under CEQA. They essentially go beyond the constitutional limits on proportionality and nexus. And so at least it's our position that there are a number of these protections that have been built in, again, both to the DA and the DDA, that will help avoid unnecessary costs being shifted to the city and retain responsibility for those for the developer. So I'm happy to answer questions, but.
Yeah, I actually do have questions. So I appreciate all these safety valves that the contract has to limit the liability of the city. But how many trap doors are there that that the city can fall into, end up owing money? Or have you eliminated all of them?
Well, I mean, we've, and I think it was mostly the DDA team primarily that was, looking at the business deal as a whole. And again, that the DDA was approved 2 weeks or last week. And that really includes a lot of the business provisions that will, place the responsibility on the developer to provide amenities, infrastructure, long-term operations and management, maintenance. And then we have some provisions in the DA that then help support that. And it's very comprehensive.
Okay, I noticed a force majeure. Is that how you say it?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Force majeure in the DDA includes pandemic, fires, other sorts of things. I don't remember seeing earthquake listed, but that would be there. So if there was some force majeure, who would be left holding the bag?
Well, it's interesting because and we have a force majeure provision both under DDA and the DA. But what the force majeure provision does is it essentially allows some of the obligations of either party to be delayed. So, for example, during a pandemic, the developer would not have to, under the DDAs, they could put off some of the construction. Now, the primary purpose of the development agreement is for the developer lock in some of the rules and assessments and fees and regulations that would apply to the development. And it's a pretty limited term. And so it's a document that essentially is there for their benefit to lock in some of those entitlements. And so what a force majeure would do is if there were another pandemic, for example, in the midst of the development, or if there's litigation that is filed challenging the approvals, some of those protections, some of those benefits would be extended. But the benefits remain, or I mean, I would say the benefits and the obligations remain if they proceed to develop.
Okay, so correct me if I'm wrong. What I'm hearing you say is that, for instance, if there were an earthquake and all the work that they had done was destroyed before they finished building, they would still be responsible for rebuilding. Is that correct? Only they would have a lot more time to do so.
And they would have, the time that would be extended would be based on whatever the force majeure delay is.
Right, but they would still be
It doesn't-
responsible for building.
Right, it does not relieve
At
them
no
of
cost
their
to the city.
obligations. Yeah,
Right,
it does
at no
not
cost
relieve
to
them
the
of
city.
obligations.
Oh, okay, at no cost to the city. All right, so there's other scenarios. What if the strategic analysis was correct and they were not able to sell their houses at the prices projected, and they were not able to sell their houses on the timeline? Who would cover the cost?
Well, like any developer, that would be, they build at their risk, and they would be obligated to pay all the taxes and assessments that were created to fund the infrastructure for the whole project, as well as that subdivision or the specific parcel. And so there's no obligation that I saw in any of the documents that the city would have to step in. It's just your normal developer risk. They roll the dice. They make big investments, and then they build homes and they try to sell them. And if the market's not what they anticipated, they bear the loss.
Okay, so for our legal representative who said that the contract was for the developers and for their benefits, does the contract in any place say that all costs will be borne by the developers in case of inability to sell houses according to schedule projected?
Yeah, that's not a provision of the development agreement.
Do you believe it should be?
May I jump in there?
Yes,
That
yes,
is a
please.
provision. That is a provision of the DDA. The entire project is the developer's responsibility. There are mechanisms that we have included in the DDA to protect those, like the guarantee, the performance bond, insurance, vehicles for which we can compel completion, compel compliance with the terms of the DDA. So those things, those protections are there.
Okay, well, somewhat. I mean, considering that Winehaven Incorporated is a organization that is founded in Delaware, which basically has no regulations and gives us no protections. What you sign in contract could be moot because of where they are established.
The guarantee is,
Sorry, Carlos, do you want to address the choice of law in the DDA as well?
well, there's the choice of law is California law. So
Right, it's not Delaware law.
we're protected by California law, not Delaware laws that are more favorable to Delaware corporations. But the guarantee isn't provided by the entity. The guarantee is provided by the principals, the very wealthy individuals that are the principals in the business structure, including the family money from Michael Dell.
Okay, so we have to convince them these aren't junk bonds, that they're actually profitable investments.
So hold up a minute. In the interest of moving this along, this is an opportunity to ask questions, not to debate
I am
or argue about things. So let's try to keep this to questions. Now, before we vote, if you want to argue your point, you'll have a chance to do that. But let's try to keep this to questions.
Okay, well, I have been asking questions. I don't think much of what I've said has not been a question. But I think we should go to public speakers.
Okay, the other council members have questions. I don't see any. So, Madam Clerk, call the public speakers, please.
Yes, we have 5 public speakers. Each speaker will be allowed up to 2 minutes.
Okay, first speaker is Jonathan Livingston. Jonathan, you have 2 minutes to speak. You can go ahead and start.
Okay, you there?
Yes.
Hey, good evening. Yeah, this is Jonathan Livingston. Good evening, Honorable Mayor and City Council members. My name is Jonathan Livingston, the Chair of your Design Review Board. The City of Richmond Design Review Board has thoroughly reviewed the SunCal Orton plan for Point Malate in the Winehaven Historic District. The Design Review Board has reviewed the Point Malate PAD zoning and related design guidelines and have approved them with careful consideration using our knowledge in planning and architecture. It was not easy, and the back and forth with the design team took months. The public comments embolden our resolve, and in the end, we feel this draft zoning that is before you tonight is the best attainable given the time and will of all involved. In summary, it is the opinion of the Design Review Board of the City of Richmond that the draft zoning that is presented to you tonight is thoroughly reviewed document that will help guide future architects and developers as they seek to propose designs for the lands of Point Malate. The open space, the landscape, grading, and park sections of the design guidelines and the zoning were quite firm in their prescription and evolved from the public's input as well as from the relevant sections of the DEIR. The DRB is satisfied with this new zoning, and the DRB supports this project. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next speaker is Pam Stello. Pam, you have 2 minutes to speak. You can go ahead and start.
Okay, my name's Pam Stello. My name's Pam Stello. I'm a Richmond resident. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I have just a few questions. Councilmember Johnson, when justifying your vote for SunCal, you said you read an 8-page paper that argued developments like SunCal's are good for communities. Since the article was important enough for you to mention, would you share how the article came to your attention, the title and author of the article? Questions for the council. Last Tuesday, you voted on a significantly changed development agreement with SunCal, one that had not been reviewed by the Design Review Board and the Planning Commission. The new development agreement does not require review of the board and the commission, and was, there's some questions I think about, because when the Design Review Board did their work, they weren't even provided the environmental impact report or the tentative vesting maps. So I'm just curious about why Chair Livingston could speak as he just did. Many participants at the meeting last Tuesday who had their electronic hands raised up to speak at the designated time were not recognized to speak, including Karina Gould, the spokesperson for the Confederated Villages of Lijan, Ohlone. Doesn't the council owe Karina Gould an apology and an opportunity to speak before this vote tonight, and the other speakers who were denied an opportunity to speak? The Point Malate settlement timelines have been changed. So I am curious as well why an extension of the timeline was not sought, given thousands of pages of documents, many technical that needed to be read by the council, as well as problems with the SunCal Fundal fiscal analysis shown tonight that continually your consultant said, in my opinion, in our view. So we have not actually had a full analysis of the problems with the SunCal funded fiscal analysis or the peer review. It has not been explained or justified to the public. Thank you.
Thank you. My next speaker is Sally Tobin. Sally, you have 2 minutes to speak. You can go ahead and start.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm Sally Tobin. I'm a resident of Richmond. And I'd like to address my deep respect for East Bay Regional Parks District, which has been an excellent steward of regional parks such as Millard Knox. They have allocated almost $5 million toward a regional park at Point Malate. And they've also written 2 letters, one to the DRB on July 21st and a second one on September 8th to the City Council, which expressed frustration about the land use plans of the Point Malate mixed use development. They have 2 basic comments. One is that the current design increases fire danger on the hillsides because the finger-like projections of the proposed park increase the boundary between the wildlands and the urban interface, and that greatly increases fire danger. And their second reservation has to do with the huge housing area across from what is now the beach park. Their concern is that this will overwhelm the beach park with those who live in the housing and basically will turn it into a private park. So consequently, the East Bay Regional Park District does not approve using that $5 million for a regional park at Point Malate, which is why the plan that you're considering tonight specifically places both the hillside open space and the beach park under management of the master association. That's like the HOA for the development and commercial areas, instead of being under an experienced park administrator. This is like putting foxes in charge of the hen house, which means that there's loss of $5 million.
Your time has expired. Thank you. My next speaker is Jim Hansen. Jim, you have 2 minutes to speak. You can go ahead and start.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. The item tonight does not address the final impact report comments of CNPS, California Native Plant Society, and others on this proposed plan, nor does it allow adequate consideration of the community plan, which is the EIR superior alternative. Many of the issues stem from just an out-of-sized, inappropriate development for Point Malate. The project before you tonight is seriously inconsistent with the Richmond General Plan. It violates at least 11 conservation, natural resource, and land use policies. Just for an example, LU1, we're supposed to take advantage of existing infrastructure and public facilities, does not. Secondly, prohibit isolated and gated communities, does not do that either. It also really seriously fails in its promise to the public on 70% open space. What you see before you in the vesting map, particularly the grading overall map, reveals intensive steep hillside grading into the what's supposed to be our public open space. Includes at least one parking lot, utility buildings. It is a really dishonest in that respect, and I think it reflects on the overall project itself. And lastly, it really inappropriately cares for the site's natural resources that give it intrinsic value, which include its coastal prairie and coastal scrub communities. The council's granted SunCal numerous time extensions, but what about for the public and for yourselves? We ask that you schedule study sessions, and particularly for those of us who live in the city, around the numerous financial issues which have never been presented except from one side: traffic, fire, environmental. And we hope that you will not vote on this tonight and really know what we're doing here. Thank you very much. And
my next speaker is Robert Chisti. Robert, you have 2 minutes to speak. You can go ahead and start. Robert? Robert?
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'm here to talk tonight about the Strategic Economics Report. And I heard what Mr. Shiver said, and I think that the first thing I would say is that if the council is really interested in an objective review of the economics of this project, it should set a session so that Strategic Economics can come in and present its analysis, because Mr. Shiver makes a number of points and comments that are inaccurate and don't really reflect what Strategic Economics did. And so I'll just leave it at that and make that offer to the council that Strategic Economics will be made available to you as you see fit. But first thing, Strategic Economics did take a careful look at the project that's been proposed, and it came up with a number of conclusions. One is that the city will lose not just a few million, but tens of millions of dollars from the project if it goes ahead with the SunCal development. and that the project is slated to lose 4.4 million at the end of the initial development period, which is at year 4, and will incur losses for the next 20 years beyond that. And at best, the project will be revenue neutral, no loss, no gain at build out, which would take about 20 years, not the 9 years that SunCal states. These losses will never be recouped from the project because the project will never generate positive income. It will be net neutral at 20 years. And the sales of homes would occur at only half the price assumed in the SunCal Winehaven analysis, based on a careful review of the market and a review of recently completed housing developments in Richmond and around. Sales prices of homes are more realistic in the strategic economics report and therefore lower than assumed in the SunCal Winehaven analysis. And due to the high cost for the infrastructure and operations, proximity to Chevron, high assessments, very limited access.
Thank you. And that was the last public speaker.
Okay, and we have one comment that came in by 1 o'clock today. The Point Melody agenda item tonight does not adequately address the final environmental impact report, comments by the California Native Plant Society, and others on the proposed SunCal project plan. The council granted SunCal numerous time extensions. In turn, the California Native Plant Society asked the council to schedule study sessions to look carefully at the numerous financial, traffic, fire, environmental, and other major issues from the public's EIR comments on the proposed SunCal mixed-use project, as well as look into the EIR environmentally superior alternative, the community plan.
Okay, that's all the public speakers. Is there any other comment before we ask for a motion? Councilor Martinez.
Yeah, I'd like, I have questions of clarification from Mr. Chasty. So if I might, is he still on?
From whom?
From Mr. Chasty.
I'm still here.
Okay, yeah. You said that the peer review of the strategic had some misrepresentations. Could you explain what those might be?
Well, you're talking about Mr. Shiver. Well, I was mentioning Mr. Shiver. Mr. Shiver has this idea that there's some sort of a double discount. That didn't happen. In fact, the thing that strategic economics did, which was, I thought, in retrospect, a reasonable thing, they didn't take into account North Richmond, which would be an area that is clearly impacted by the refinery. Instead, they took into account communities that are much further away. The study that they cited was a Houston study where the ground is primarily flat. And so when they're talking about a 2-mile distance from the refinery, it has much more to do with the topography of a flat area. What you're looking at here is you have a freeway intervening between Point Richmond. Point Richmond doesn't have a sales point and a sales price that's related to the refinery because it's considered distant enough. And on the other side of Point Richmond, it's even further. So when you add the other particular developments that are beyond the 2 miles, even by a small amount, there's no comparison between the kinds of issues that come up with next to a refinery, like would happen at Point Melody, or the ones at North Richmond. What you have is an entirely different community that's unrelated to the refinery. So there's no double dipping in that regard.
Okay, and were there other inconsistencies?
Well, I think that the lack of access is an issue that has not been properly addressed. And I think that the not understanding and not accepting that this is a serious impediment for the kinds of price points you get is a part of the weakness of the developer's proposal. And just for an example, the developer's proposal on 7 pages from the end in one of its tables, it has the amount of income that would be necessary for the developer's proposed price points. So they range from $235,000 per year per household up to $280,000 per year per household for the least expensive and to the most expensive households that they expect to sell. That excludes all of Richmond. And the point of that is that the people who are coming in with those household incomes have choices that they can make. and the likelihood of their being able to pick another place, either in Richmond, in Point Richmond or elsewhere, or in the surrounding communities like in Marin or further down the road in Berkeley, Albany, or even further up the road are significant. So the point of this is that it's unrealistic to assume that the impact of the refinery is simply to be ill addressed, is the way it was in the SunCal proposal, in the SunCal economic proposal.
Okay, I have one final question. If we were to have a community forum on the economics of the SunCal development, what would you envision happening? What would you hope to see?
Well, I think that some of the questions that were raised, we have a couple of minutes to address everything and can't do it. Mr. Shiver had, as much time as he needed. I don't begrudge him that, but I think a reasonable thing for the city to do with these economic risks. The city right now had started earlier this year with a $30 million potential deficit, and through a series of budget tricks, it staved off that Armageddon. But that's coming back. I think that the city should have a real thorough analysis and bring in strategic economics and go over why they think that this is a very risky thing for the city of Richmond, and why you could be tens of $millions in the hole on top of the budget deficit and the budget grief that you already have in the city of Richmond.
Yeah, and one of the concerns that I've had, and I mentioned it as the force majeure, being the pandemic being listed. I understand that the economic forecast for 2021 is not that bright. How do you feel that would affect the development of the SunCal?
Well, the enforceability of the agreement is only useful insofar as that you have somebody on the other side that has assets to protect. But if these development projects are all siloed, so this particular project, SunCal, created a new limited liability corporation. It's siloed. It won't have much in the way of assets, and it will go bankrupt if it chooses because of the economics of the job. And there's nothing the city can do about that if that happens. So what will happen is the city will be left holding the bag. And in a sense, because of the economics of it, this is a high-end housing enclave that's being planned. What you'd end up is having the residents of Richmond have to subsidize this. This is reverse Robin Hood. It's robbing from the poor to give money to the rich.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do any other council members have comments?
I'd like to know, are we finished with Eduardo and Meet the Press, 60 Minutes?
Thank you for elevating my questions to that level.
No, he's taking his 60 minutes. Okay. Is there a motion on this?
Yeah, I'll move not to approve H7.
I second that.
Okay. Let's vote on that.
I'll make a substitute motion
Okay, substitute motion.
that we proceed with the approval of the agreement.
Okay, is there a second?
If I might just clarify sort of the item on, which is to adopt the ordinance second reading of the planned area district and adopt the ordinance second reading of the development agreement.
Right.
Okay, that's included in the motion.
Right. Is there a second to
Second.
Vice Chair's motion? Okay, we have a second. Let's vote on the substitute motion. Call the roll, Madam Clerk.
Vice Mayor Bates,
Yes.
Councilmember Choi,
Yes.
Councilmember Johnson,
Yes.
Councilmember Martinez,
No.
Councilmember Willis,
No.
and Mayor Butt.
Yes. So the substitute motion carries.
Yes, the substitute motion passes with Council members Martinez and Willis voting no, and Councilmember Myrick is absent.
Are we at the end of our agenda now, except for item L?
No, it's to reports of officers, referrals to staff, and general reports, including
Right.
1, 2, 3, 4 reports.
Okay, anybody have any reports? Okay, I don't see any. Anybody have anything else? Thank you. Enjoy your evening. It's a little bit smoke-free tonight. You can actually go outside. It's a nice evening. So enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you and good night.
Good night.